Hey everyone, welcome to Watch It Paint. In this video we're going to be painting the Banshee from Adrenaline by Czech Games Edition. I've had this game forever. I think I got it like last Christmas. I've not played it, but I'm getting around to painting it. I'm going to start with the Banshee, and I think this is my favourite sculpt and the artwork. Well, probably my favourite artwork. Yeah, maybe not my favourite sculpt. Maybe the robot's a little bit cooler, but the artwork's pretty swish for this, so I thought I'd paint this one first. We're going to be using Turquoise. This is Vallejo's Turquoise, and it's almost like 100% match for the colour the plastic was in to begin with. So you can see I'm applying this with quite an old brush, just applying, it's a game colour, so it's the primer and base coat all in one. So I'm just sort of slap dashing this on to give some coverage to stick the rest of the paints to. But you can see it's almost 100% match to the original plastic, which is the skin colour I think she's sort of represented, I think it's a she, represented in the artwork with. So that's quite hard to see, but I tried to cover everywhere with it to give us a nice primed base coaty style goodness, which we'll use for the skin and not have to paint that another one. So now I have that game colour range as the primer, as the base, I'm going to start, bringing out the Army Painter paints where I've got a better colour to match, and Necromancer Cloak is one of my favourite greys, and I have nothing like that in the Vallejo range. So Necromancer Cloak is going to be for all of these grey bits all over her. She's basically, it's quite cool. The artwork, like I say, it's my favourite artwork in the game. It's quite a nice picture full stop, but it's only really sort of three colours. She's blue, grey and silver, and then her gun's a little bit weird, as we'll see as I get to that. Now, the brushes I'm using are my Rosemary & Co brushes now. Very, very nice point, sable hair. This is the 3/0 brush. It's quite a detailed brush. It's quite a big model, actually. I could possibly have got away with a bigger brush, but I was painting this when I was quite new to these Rosemary & Co brushes, so possibly didn't choose the brushes as well as I could because I wasn't as used to them as I would be with all one. So I sort of matched it to what I would have been using in the Army Painter range, which was the detail brush. Whereas this has got a lot more integers between each range sort of thing. So there's lots of different size brushes. So I could possibly have gone to a larger brush than that, but smaller than the sort of regiment brush I would have been used to in the Army Painter. So hopefully in the video here you're managing to see which parts I'm painting grey, but I'm just following the artwork. It's as simple as that. It's a sort of paint by numbers bit, and then all of these details that are on this sort of garment. She's wearing this cloak, this skirting, body armor, that sort of thing. All of the raised parts, all of the detailing, I'm going to do in Claymore Blade by the Army Painter, bright silver, which I'm going to tone down with a wash in the not too distant future. I'm just basically, following the artwork, painting on all the silver bits, potentially off of the artwork where you can't see, when it's sort of behind and stuff, using, common sense, just my best judgment to work out which parts would probably be silver. And what's just going to make it more interesting. So you're going to see on mine how I've chosen to do it, and hopefully give you some idea of what you do or don't like. If there's some parts you don't like, you don't have to do it. I am not going to be forcing your hand to do anything that I necessarily do. In a lot of ways, I often think my video is quite useful for, it could be showing you what I think you should do, but also showing you what you may want to avoid. Just because I do it doesn't mean you have to do it, and let me make the mistakes sort of for you and that sort of thing, and show you how it looks if you do it my way. But you guys don't have to. I'm not gonna hunt you down if you don't. But do share some pictures. The old Instagram, tag me in. Do let me see how you get on. So that was her done. I'm onto a gun now, which in the artwork I'm following along is just basically white with some sort of orange detailing and some lights on it. So it looks a bit weird to me. It stands out a little bit. It's a bit of a sore thumb in my opinion. It looks quite good in the artwork, but I hate painting white. So we're going to do some shading. This is just a Survivor shader, just a black wash. And I'm just going to apply that all over the Necromancer Cloak, all over that Claymore Blade. It's going to tarnish and dull down the silver a little bit. And because it's just that little bit darker than the Necromancer Cloak, it's going to start, forming and pooling in the recesses, and just give it a bit of 3D detailing. And then blue tone by the Army Painter, that's the blue ink, the blue wash. And I'm going to do that all over that turquoise skin, just to give her some shadows, give some depth to her skin. And just, again, back out with my damaged old regiment brush, not really being too precise, too careful with this, just applying it as well as I sort of can do. And that's all the washing I'm going to do. Maybe just a light watered down version of the Survivor shader across the gun to give it a bit of a grayer tone. Then I'm going to dry brush on Filthy Suit all over any of that Necromancer Cloak that's exposed. I'm going to catch all the ridges, all of the folds. There's not many folds on this model, to be honest. I'm just having a look at it in my hands now as I'm talking. There's very few folds. It's mostly ridges on her armor, ridges down her cloak at the front. But if you catch all of those, it's going to make them pop out and bring back out the detail in those parts of the model. Then I'm going to get out Turquoise again. And this essentially, they are my Rosemary & Co brushes, but this is essentially a detail brush by them. I'm going to very, very carefully paint back in the skin tone. It's all tentacles, it's all tubular. So I'm just trying to catch it sort of down the center of the tubes, at the angles where the light would be hitting it, and I'm sort of judging that per tentacle really as I'm going through it. This is heavily watered down. I'd say it's probably 50% water to paint, if not more, half and half, maybe even more water. And you can build up these levels. I've mentioned a few times, I often do some extra coats off camera because you don't really gain very much from me painting the same thing over and over on camera. But I do like to try and tell you that, that will have taken multiple coats to blend it as nicely as I could. But using the blue tone and the turquoise together, I didn't take the skin tone too far away from its base. So there's not that much highlighting to do. It's going to be a nice blend quite easily because they were already similar. Then I'm going to use matte white and just paint back in all the raised parts of that gun. Just bring back in that base color, just leaving that tiny bit of shade that I applied, that watered down Survivor shader. So it's just in the recesses, just giving it a little bit of a shadow. And then in that time, we can assume the previous coats on the skin are nice and dry. So I'm mixing 50-50 turquoise with white, just lightening that up, and then again blending this down, being much more precise, much more careful, getting this down all the very middles of all those tentacles and things like elbows and sides of her face, all the little edges. But there's not; it's all round. So I'm just painting central lines of that brightness and blending it in. Claymore Blade, similar to every other time. I'm just highlighting back in the base color. So being more central, trying to keep the focus of the brightness in the middle of all these metal parts, not going too close to those recesses, leaving like the recess darker, so that the shades settled in the recesses, but also the washes sort of spread onto the silver a little bit on these bits, because they were all quite flat. So I'm just trying to show the center off as being a little bit shinier, a little bit more like the lights catching down the middle. Then I'm going to go on to doing some detailing on that gun, which I was already like, I don't like it. I don't really love it in white. But, let's follow the artwork along. It's white. It's got some orange detailing on. Most of this detailing isn't actually on the gun, so I'm having to freehand all of this. It's quite difficult. I do think, come the end, it looks fairly much like the artwork. I did do it justice, I just don't like it myself. So let me know in the comments below if you've got any better suggestions for what to do with her sort of laser rifle, that sort of thing. I'm sure there'll be a fair few people who dislike the gun. So, in the comments below, better ways of doing it, or alternative ways, not necessarily better. It's all very subjective, isn't it? I'm also going to try and add some of these lights for the lighting and the lights on the gun. I'm just going to use a bit of Babe Blonde, just splash on, looking at the artwork and guessing roughly where they would be on the gun. As I said, there's no detailing. I'm just eyeballing that, freehand as best I can. And then for the base, I'm going to paint the top black, and I'm going to leave that turquoise blue rim just to make it even more easily identifiable as, the color, matching it to the card and such like that. And I think it just makes it look slightly more interesting than a plain black base. That's the model completely finished. 1 hour, 9 minutes. It's not a long time, is it? It's the number of colours. It's only really 3 colours and a faff with that gun. All in all, I love the artwork. As I mentioned, I did enjoy painting this specific model. It's quite big. It's got detail, but it's big chunky detail. It's fairly easy to paint. The gun's quite difficult, but the rest is quite pleasurable. It's only 3 colours. That's never difficult. Let me know in the comments below if you'd like to see another Adrenaline model and which one would you like to see. And cheers for watching.